This is a story about something that happened to me and my wife Jenna 2 years ago. To this day, we still have trouble sleeping through the night, and I don't think we will ever truly feel safe in our own home again. It was our first New Year's Eve as parents. Our son Liam was only 3 months old. If you're a parent, you know that the party lifestyle pretty much dies the second you bring the baby home. We used to go out to bars or huge house parties on New Year's, but that year, our big plan was just to try and stay awake until midnight. Liam had been colicky for weeks, screaming his lungs out every night from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. But that night, by some miracle, he went down easily around 8:30. We put him in his crib in the nursery, which is on the second floor at the back of the house. We have one of those high-end video monitors that connects to an app on your phone, but it also has a dedicated handheld screen. We set the screen up on the coffee table in the living room, right next to the bowl of chips and dip. The living room was cozy. We had the TV volume low, watching the pre-show for the ball drop in Times Square. Honestly, we were both dozing off by 10:30. The house was quiet, except for the TV and the occasional car driving by outside. Every 10 minutes or so, I'd glance at the monitor. It was in night vision mode, so everything was black and white and slightly grainy. I could see Liam swaddled up, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. It was the most peaceful he'd looked in weeks. Around 11:50 p.m., the anticipation on TV started building up. The hosts were shouting, the music was getting louder, and the energy was high. I grabbed the remote and turned the volume up just a little bit, wanting to feel some of that excitement. Jenna went to the kitchen to pour us 2 glasses of sparkling cider since she was breastfeeding and didn't want alcohol. 10 minutes to midnight, the TV announced. Outside, the neighborhood was starting to get noisy. We live in a suburb where people take fireworks seriously. A few pops went off down the street. I looked at the monitor. Liam didn't move. "He's out cold," I told Jenna as she came back in. "I hope the big fireworks don't wake him up." "If he wakes up, you're going in there," she joked, sitting next to me. 11:59 p.m. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. We counted along and clinked our glasses at 0. Immediately, our neighborhood erupted. It sounded like a war zone. Someone 2 houses down must have bought professional-grade mortars because the booms were shaking our windows. It was loud, really loud. I immediately looked at the monitor, flinching, expecting to see Liam screaming and thrashing. But he wasn't. He was perfectly still. "Wow," Jenna said, looking at the screen over my shoulder. "He must be really tired. He didn't even twitch." I stared at the screen. "Yeah," I said. "That's lucky." Another massive boom shook the house. The dog next door started barking like crazy. On the screen, Liam remained statue still. A weird feeling hit my stomach. It wasn't relief anymore. It was confusion. Liam was a light sleeper. He woke up if the floorboards creaked. How was he sleeping through explosions that were rattling the glass in the frames? I picked up the monitor to get a closer look. The image was clear, baby in the crib still sleeping. Then I saw it. In the top right corner of the monitor screen, there is a small digital clock that displays the current time. It read 11:42 p.m. I looked at the cable box on our TV stand. It read 12:04 a.m. My blood ran cold. The image on the screen wasn't live. It was frozen. It had been frozen for over 20 minutes. "Jenna, the monitor, it's frozen." She looked at me, confused. "What?" "Look at the time," I whispered. "It says 11:42. He's not sleeping through the noise. We aren't watching him." I didn't wait for her to answer. I dropped the monitor on the couch and sprinted for the stairs. I heard Jenna right behind me, gasping. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The hallway was dark. I reached the nursery door and threw it open. I expected to hear crying. I expected to see him sleeping. Instead, I felt a cold draft. I flipped the light switch. The first thing I saw was the curtains blowing violently into the room. The window, which we always kept locked, was wide open. The screen had been cut and pushed out. It was lying on the lawn below. I ran to the crib. It was empty. The swaddle blanket was there, unraveled and tossed to the side, but Liam was gone. "He's gone!" I screamed. I don't think I've ever made a sound like that in my life. Jenna ran into the room, saw the empty crib, and collapsed to the floor, screaming his name. I ran to the window and looked out. The street was dark, lit only by the flashes of fireworks still going off in the distance. The celebratory noise felt mocking now. While we were sitting downstairs, clinking glasses and watching a frozen image of our sleeping son, someone had climbed a ladder, cut our screen, and taken him. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. I was shouting so loud that the operator had to tell me to stop so she could understand the address. The next hour was a blur of blue lights and police radios. They set up a perimeter immediately. The officer in charge told us that whoever did this likely used the noise of the early fireworks to mask the sound of the window sliding open. They knew we were distracted by the holiday. They found footprints in the snow in our backyard leading to the side gate, which was left unlatched. I felt like I was going to throw up. I paced the living room, holding Jenna, thinking about how I had looked at that monitor at 11:50 and 11:55, thinking he was safe. I was looking at a ghost image while my son was being carried out into the cold. About 2 hours later, the radio on the officer's shoulder crackled. "Suspect detained. We have the infant. He appears unharmed." Jenna and I both burst into tears. They caught her 4 blocks away. It was a woman in her late 40s. She was walking down the sidewalk, humming to herself, holding Liam wrapped in a thick coat. A patrol car had stopped her just because it looked odd for someone to be walking a baby in freezing temperatures at 2 a.m. on New Year's. When they approached her, she claimed it was her grandson, but she couldn't give his name or date of birth correctly. We found out later that she lived in the neighborhood. She had lost her own child years ago and had suffered a mental breakdown. She had been watching our house for weeks, learning our schedule and noticing the nursery window. She timed it for the fireworks, knowing the noise would cover her tracks. She had even used a signal jammer she bought online to freeze our high-end monitor. We got Liam back that night. He was cold and hungry, but otherwise okay. We didn't sleep for days. We actually sold that house 3 months later. We couldn't stay in a place where someone had watched us like that. We threw that video monitor in the trash. Now we just keep the nursery door open and one of us is always awake. Technology is great, but it can lie to you. And sometimes the scariest things happen when you think you're safest, right under your nose. I've never been a huge fan of parties. I'm the kind of guy who stands near the wall, checking the time every 10 minutes, waiting for a socially acceptable moment to slip away. But it was New Year's Eve 2019, and my roommates, Sam and Jarrett, had practically dragged me to this massive house party in the suburbs of Chicago. The house was packed to the gills. The bass from the speakers was rattling the window panes, and the air was thick with the suffocating scent of expensive perfume and cheap beer. I didn't know many people there. It was mostly friends of friends, a sea of blurred faces. I was standing by the kitchen island, feeling completely out of place, just counting down the minutes until midnight. At around 11:45 p.m., the music cut out abruptly. The silence was jarring, a physical weight that dropped onto the room. The chatter died down instantly as a heavy, authoritative pounding echoed from the front door. "Police! Open up!" A deep, booming voice bellowed from the porch. My stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything wrong, but that instinctual, cold fear of authority kicks in the second you hear that tone. Everyone froze. Sam, the host, looked pale as he walked to the door and pulled it open. An officer stepped in. He looked legitimate. Dark navy uniform, a badge glinting sharply under the hallway light, and a utility belt heavy with gear. He was a big guy, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it was carved out of granite. He scanned the room with a high-intensity flashlight, the beam cutting through the dim party lighting like a blade. It landed right on me. "Is there a David Miller here?" he barked. My heart started hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. My throat went bone dry. That's me," I managed to say, my voice cracking. The officer marched through the crowd. People parted like the Red Sea, looking at me with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. "Step forward," he commanded. "What? Why? What did I do?" I stammered, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding an incident involving a hit and run on December 20th, he said coldly. "Turn around." "Hit and run!" I shouted, panic rising like a tide. "I haven't hit anyone. I drive a Corolla. Check my car. There must be a mistake." He didn't blink. "Tell it to the judge. Turn around. Now." He grabbed my shoulder with a grip like an iron vise and spun me around. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt, and the sound of them ratcheting tight around my wrists, that metallic clicking sound, was the loudest thing in the room. He did it tight. Too tight. "You have the right to remain silent," he recited, his voice a low, rhythmic drone as he shoved me toward the door. I looked back at my friends. Sam and Jared were standing there, mouths open, looking absolutely terrified. I pleaded with them with my eyes to do something, to call my parents, to say something, but they just stood there like statues. I felt utterly betrayed. The officer marched me out into the freezing Chicago night. The wind cut right through my thin shirt, biting at my skin. "Officer, please, check my license. I was at work on the 20th. I have records," I begged as we walked down the driveway. "Quiet," he snapped. We reached the curb, and I expected to see a squad car with flashing lights, the standard blue and red that usually brings a sense of order. Instead, the street was empty, dark, and silent. "Where's your car?" I asked, a new kind of dread settling in. Before he could answer, a large black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down the street. It had no markings on the side, but it had small red and blue lights flashing behind the front grille. The officer who arrested me seemed to tense up. The SUV pulled up right next to us, the engine idling with a low, predatory growl. The window rolled down. I couldn't see the driver's face clearly, just a dark silhouette. "I've got him," the driver said. His voice was rough, like gravel hitting metal. "Prisoner transport. Put him in the back." The officer holding me hesitated. For a split second, I saw a flash of confusion, maybe even fear, cross his face. He looked at the SUV, then back at the house, then at me. "Officer?" I whispered, shivering. "Get in," the arresting officer said quickly. His voice had lost its authority. He sounded nervous, almost desperate. He opened the back door of the SUV and practically shoved me inside. "Wait, the seatbelt," I started, but he slammed the door shut. I watched through the tinted glass as the officer who arrested me turned and power-walked back toward the house. He didn't look like a cop anymore. He looked like a man running away from a crime scene. The SUV accelerated instantly. I was sliding around on the leather seat because my hands were cuffed behind my back. The car smelled awful, a mix of wet dog and sharp, stinging antiseptic. "Sir," I called out to the front, "where are we going? Which precinct?" The driver didn't answer. He was driving fast, way over the speed limit, blowing through a stop sign without tapping the brakes. "Hey, you just ran a stop sign!" I yelled. He turned onto a road that led away from the city, toward the old, decaying industrial district. "Sir, the station is downtown. You're going the wrong way." The driver finally looked in the rearview mirror. His eyes were lit by the eerie green glow of the dashboard lights. He wasn't wearing a police hat. He was wearing a dirty, sweat-stained baseball cap, and he was smiling, a wide, yellow-toothed grin. "We aren't going to the station, David," he said softly. My blood turned to ice. "What?" I choked out. "I saw your friend bring you out," the driver interrupted. "Nice of him to package you up for me. Handcuffed and everything. Saves me so much work, my friend." I hissed. That was a cop." The driver laughed, a dry, hacking sound that turned into a cough. "That wasn't a cop, kid. That was a costume. I've been watching that house for 2 hours, waiting for someone to walk out alone. I got lucky. You walked out in chains." The reality hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The officer inside the house, the way my friends looked, the lack of a real squad car. It was a prank. My friends had hired an actor to scare me for New Year's. That's why the first guy looked nervous when this SUV showed up. He thought this was the real police. He was terrified of getting caught impersonating an officer, so he handed me over to the first authority figure he saw to get rid of the evidence. I wasn't in a police transport. I was in a stranger's car, handcuffed, heading into the darkness. "Let me out!" I screamed, kicking the door with everything I had. "It was a joke! It was just a joke!" "It's not a joke to me," the man said, clicking the child lock button on his door. He reached under his seat and pulled out something metallic, a long, serrated blade. "Now sit back and enjoy the ride, David. The new year is just starting." We were miles from the house now. The streetlights had vanished. It was just the headlights cutting through the endless rows of frozen cornfields and abandoned warehouses. I started hyperventilating, the air feeling thin and sharp. I tugged at the handcuffs until my wrists bled, but they were real, professional-grade steel. The car slowed down and turned onto a gravel road that led into a dense patch of woods near the river. "Please," I sobbed, "I have money! Take my wallet!" "I don't want your money," he said, putting the car in park and killing the engine. The darkness swallowed us whole. "I just want to play." He opened his door. The interior light didn't come on. He must have disabled it. I heard his heavy boots crunching on the gravel as he walked around to my side. I squeezed my eyes shut, curled my legs up to my chest, and prepared to kick the moment the door opened. The door flew open. Cold air rushed in. He reached for me, and I kicked out with every ounce of adrenaline in my body. My heel connected with his chest, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled back, cursing. I scrambled out of the car, falling face first onto the frozen dirt. I couldn't use my hands to break the fall, and my nose took the full impact. Pain exploded in my face, but I didn't feel it, not really. I got up and ran. I ran blindly into the woods. Without my arms for balance, I was stumbling, crashing into trees and tearing my face on low-hanging branches. "I have a flashlight," he yelled from behind me. "You can't hide!" A beam of light cut through the trees, sweeping left and right. I threw myself behind a thick oak tree, pressing my body into the rough bark. My breath was coming in ragged gasps that sounded like thunder in the silent woods. I heard him walking. He was slow, methodical. "Come on out, David. You're still wearing the bracelets. You can't go far." He was right. I couldn't climb. I couldn't fight. I looked around desperately and saw an old rusted drainage pipe half buried in the ground. It looked too small for a man, but it was my only chance. I waited for the light to swing away, then I dove for it. I wiggled inside feet first. It was tight, claustrophobic, and filled with freezing muck. I shimmied back as far as I could go, the smell of rot filling my nose. Footsteps stopped right outside the pipe. The light shone in. I held my breath, tears streaming down my face. The light didn't reach all the way back to me, but it was inches away. "I know you're close," he whispered. He stood there for 5 minutes, just listening. Eventually, he kicked the side of the pipe, a deafening clang that made me scream internally. Then he walked away. I stayed in that pipe until the sun came up.
When I finally crawled out, half frozen and covered in filth, I walked for an hour until I found a gas station. The clerk almost had a heart attack when he saw a man in handcuffs, covered in blood and mud, stumbling towards the counter. The police arrived and cut the cuffs off. Later at the station, my friends were in the lobby crying. They explained everything. The first officer was indeed an actor, a friend of a friend. The plan was to arrest me, put me in his car for 5 minutes, and then drive me back to the party for a laugh. But when that black SUV pulled up with lights, the actor panicked. He thought he was being busted by real undercover cops and handed me over to the first authority figure he saw to get rid of the evidence. I wasn't in a police transport. I was in a stranger's car, handcuffed, heading into the darkness. I don't talk to Sam or Jared anymore. I moved to a different state. Every New Year's, when the clock strikes 12 and the fireworks start, I just lock my doors, sit in the dark, and wait for the sun to come up.
Back in 2018, I was a junior in college, living in a gloomy garden-level apartment in Ohio. It was one of those cheap complexes where the walls were paper-thin and the hallways always smelled like damp carpet and stale cigarettes. Because I was taking extra winter courses and working a part-time retail job, I decided not to fly home to California for the holidays. It was just too expensive, and I needed the hours at work. So when New Year's Eve rolled around, I was completely alone. My 2 roommates had gone back to their families, leaving the apartment dead silent. Around 7 p.m., I was heating up a frozen pizza, trying to ignore the muffled sounds of parties starting in the distance. I wasn't really sad, just bored, until there was a heavy, deliberate knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbor from across the hall, a man named Arthur. Arthur was in his late 50s, a balding man who always wore thick, oversized wool sweaters. We had only spoken in passing, usually just a nod at the mailboxes or a mumbled hello while taking out the trash. He seemed harmless, if a bit socially awkward and lonely. I opened the door. "Hey, Arthur, what's up?" He shifted his weight from foot to foot, looking nervous. "Hello, Mark," he said, avoiding eye contact. I made a roast for tonight, a New Year's tradition, but I realized I made far too much for just one person. I saw your lights were on and figured you might be alone too. Would you like to join me?" The smell wafting from his open door was incredible. Rosemary, garlic, and slow-cooked meat. It smelled 1,000 times better than my frozen pizza. I hesitated, but I felt a wave of pity for the guy. "Sure," I said. "Let me just grab my phone." I locked my door and followed him into his apartment. The layout was identical to mine, but the vibe was hauntingly different. My place was messy with textbooks and video games. His was disturbingly neat. There was almost no furniture, just a small wooden table with 2 chairs, a brown leather couch, and no TV. The only light came from a dim lamp in the corner and the harsh fluorescent bulb in the kitchen. "Sit," he urged, gesturing to the table. He had already set it perfectly. 2 plates, silverware lined up with surgical precision. As I sat down, I heard the distinct, heavy click of the deadbolt locking behind me. I turned around. Arthur was standing by the door, smiling. "Just to keep the draft out," he said softly. He sat across from me and started serving the food. The roast tasted amazing, but the conversation was wrong from the start. He didn't ask normal questions. Instead, he leaned in and asked, "So, your roommates? They're gone for the whole week, right? No one else has a key?" I chewed slowly, a knot forming in my stomach. "Yeah, they'll be back on the 4th. "And your parents? They know you're here alone?" "We texted earlier," I lied. I hadn't talked to them all day. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just making conversation," Arthur said, staring at me without blinking. "It's rare to see a young man so isolated. The atmosphere became suffocating. The only sound was the occasional pop of a firework outside. About 20 minutes in, Arthur suddenly dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the ceramic plate. "I have a surprise for dessert," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I made it specifically for you, Mark." "I should probably head back soon," I said, heart racing. I started to stand up. "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a request. His face had transformed. The nervous, friendly neighbor was gone. His eyes were cold and vacant. "I really have to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I said sit down," he snapped, slamming his palm on the table. At that exact moment, a cell phone started ringing. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't coming from Arthur's pocket. The sound was coming from his back bedroom. Arthur's eyes widened in genuine panic. He stood up abruptly. "Stay right here. Do not move." He hurried down the hallway into the bedroom and slammed the door shut. I didn't wait. The second that door clicked, I bolted for the front door. I grabbed the deadbolt, but it wouldn't turn. It was a double-cylinder lock, the kind that requires a key from the inside to open. My blood ran cold. My apartment didn't have this. He had installed it himself to keep people in. I looked frantically for a key. Nothing. From the bedroom, I heard Arthur's voice, muffled but screaming in rage. He wasn't on the phone. He was yelling at someone who wasn't there. "You ruined it. You were supposed to be quiet." I ran to the kitchen. We were on the garden level, so the windows were at ground level outside. I tried to slide the window up, but it was jammed. I looked closer. Screws had been driven directly into the frame. He had sealed the apartment shut. I heard the bedroom door handle turn. I grabbed a heavy glass soda bottle from the table and ducked behind the kitchen island. Arthur walked back into the living room. "Mark?" he called out. His voice was sickeningly sweet again. "Where did you go? Dessert is ready." I peeked around the corner. He was holding a roll of silver duct tape in one hand and a box cutter in the other. He began checking the corners of the room. He was between me and the door. I needed a distraction. I grabbed the heavy ceramic platter that held the roast and hurled it as hard as I could toward the bathroom door. It shattered with a massive crash. Arthur spun toward the noise, screaming, "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I sprinted from the kitchen, charging straight at him. I slammed my shoulder into his chest, knocking him backward. He tripped over a chair and hit the floor hard, the box cutter sliding away. I dove for him, not to fight, but for his belt loop. I had seen something shiny there earlier. Keys. He grabbed my ankle, his grip surprisingly strong. He kicked out, his shoe catching me in the ribs and knocking the wind out of me. I stomped my heel down on his wrist until he shrieked and let go. I ripped the keys off his belt, scrambled to the door, and jammed the key into the lock. "You can't leave!" Arthur screamed, blood dripping from his nose as he scrambled toward me. The lock clicked. I threw the door open and practically fell into the hallway. I didn't even go to my apartment. I ran straight up the stairs, out of the building and into the freezing night. I didn't stop until I reached a 24-hour gas station 3 blocks away. When the police arrived at the complex, Arthur was gone. His front door was wide open. But what they found inside was enough to make me drop out of school and move back to California the next day. In his bedroom, they didn't find another person. The voice I heard him yelling at was a recording of myself he had captured and was playing back. But the closet was the real nightmare. Behind his clothes, they found a small hidden crawl space that connected to the shared ventilation shafts, the vents that led directly into my apartment. They found hundreds of photos. Photos of me sleeping, photos of me watching TV, photos taken from inside my own bedroom while I was away at class. He had been coming into my apartment for months, using a spare key he had stolen from the landlord's office. On the kitchen counter, next to a bowl of ice cream, the police found a syringe and a bottle of high-grade sedative. They never found Arthur. To this day, every New Year's Eve, I make sure my doors are triple locked, and I never, ever answer a knock after dark.